So here we go. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for joining this call. The general purpose of it, I suppose, is to figure out. Well, first, I'd be curious to know your thoughts about the conscious learning initiative that Wendy and I mentioned during the call on July 2nd, and how you envision your participation in it, or yeah, what that brings up for you, and whether there would be anything that you would like to suggest adding to that initiative, or shifting or shaping it in any way, and perhaps there are other topics that are in the same general theme or connected with the same general theme that you would also like to discuss or bring up. So yeah, I didn't really prepare any detailed agenda. Yeah, so that would be for me. Wendy, is there anything that you would like to also call our attention to?
No, I think we just see what comes up, what's rich and juicy for everyone. It's always the best way of moving forward on a planning thing.
Super, thanks. So yeah, perhaps we could have just a first round of sharing our reflections on what we perceived, what we heard, what we saw in the call on July 2nd. I'm sorry, it's 12 days ago. Yeah, apologies if it doesn't feel so fresh anymore. But yeah, is there anything that anyone would like to share as regards the conversation that we had and the topics people brought up, the energy, anything at all? Wendy?
So for me, having been a little involved with Dorian's planning beforehand, I just found the energy at that meeting so exciting that we always forget that almost everyone in deep adaptation is excited to try and help and try and do stuff. And around learning, for me, yeah, I mean, this is simplifying, but it's really the thing that we're trying to do in deep adaptation is open people to different ways of looking at their situation. And that is learning. You know, that fundamentally, that's adult learning. That's just shifting our position, our worldview. So I just get super excited about every single possible idea. I had a brief chat to Kat today about her new role and just touching sides with her, Dorian, with one of your tools. I think it was coffee time or whatever it was. So that was great, because we probably wouldn't have made the time if not for that invitation. And this came up about how she's got some ideas and we were bouncing ideas of each other, and she went away from the meeting for her role with a slightly different perspective on some of the stuff we discussed, because I just, shoved a whole bunch of stuff at her saying, I'm not attached to any of this, but what about? And I constantly see that. I mean, I'm editing Nando's interview that Dorian and I did at the moment, and I get goosebumps looking at some of the stuff. I mean, Emma Mary comes up so often as a huge trigger for people. Huge. I shouldn't probably be mentioning specific, but just in this group, it's certainly worth being aware that Dorian and I are aware of quite a lot of deep shift that's happened to people in the Earth Listening Circle. So we never know what it is. And actually, it's not up to any of us to say, right, here's the thesis, here's sorry, Dorian, no offense to you at all, but here's the PhD research that says this is the kind of learning we need, and this is the route we're going to go. We need to just keep enabling all of these things, I think. And so I'm super keen to put support into any and every project, not too scattergun because we need to put energy and get some stuff done. But for me, I feel like we're on the edge of something quite exciting. We've done quite a lot of deep adaptation work, a lot of us here, and we have some feedback to give, and we know who some of the people are that have a profound effect. Let's make sure that new people coming in and people who have come in the last year and maybe weren't part of an initial. Hey, Matthew. Yeah, so I'm yakketing on. I don't have a specific idea. I'm going to hand over now back to Dorian.
Thanks a lot, Wendy. Yeah, it's I really appreciate it. What you just said regarding the people or the circles maybe that seem to have the deepest impact on people arriving in the deep adaptation space, and pointing newcomers to those places. It felt quite true to me. Yeah. So Matthew, welcome here. We were just having a round of sharing as to our observations from the July 2nd call, in which Wendy and I presented the conscious learning initiative thing, and sharing our thoughts or impressions as regards what we experienced during that call, and if it's leading us to think of doing certain things in particular or not. So I don't know, perhaps you'd like to check in with us, and if you'd like to add a few comments as to why you joined us and what happened for you on that call last time, that could be good.
I'm still landing. I had a busy turnaround from my last meeting, and been quite triggered today. Just I read a article called Hospice Earth, and it was a brilliant piece of writing. I really spoke to me and what the sort of place I'm arriving at. So it was great to see such an insightful piece of writing, but very, very serious sort of topic matter. So I'm a bit today. I really enjoyed the call. I thought there was a lot that was really exciting. It may take me a bit longer to sort of really tune in and have much to say about it. I felt very aligned with what was shared, and keen to participate, but I can't give you more detail than that right in this moment.
No problem at all. Thanks a lot, Matthew. Kat or David, would you like to share anything?
I'll jump in if you don't mind, David. I really loved the energy of the first call back at the beginning of the month with you and Wendy and us and others. And I loved reading the stories. You'd published 4, I think, at that point, Dorian, onto the website. And I really enjoyed reading them. I know all of those individuals, but I learned something about each of the stories that I read. I learned about the individuals. So I really valued that. The approach that you're proposing about how this might progress and where the possibilities are feels really exciting for me, and far beyond your personal interest or the research. So, and it feels like it dovetails with lots of other things. I balk and resist all the time. We've been having conversations probably since I joined, so 2 years, more than 2 years, about we need a curriculum for deep adaptation, we need a prescription, we need answers, and that really I don't like that, because that always points back to someone holding the wisdom. And my perception is that we all hold some wisdom. And this has been born out of the investigations and interviews that you've done, but I feel like there are loads of voices within deep adaptation that have really valuable stuff to share. And so it feels really in alignment with David's concept around the DAF television and the interviews and the programming that he's been toying with around how do we get more voices into the mix. It feels really exciting about in terms of who might want to contribute to this body of wisdom and the ways in which they can do that. So for some people that'll be about storytelling, for others it'll be about academic serious writing, for others it'll be about video or podcast, for others it'll be some other expression. And it just feels like a really I suppose this feels like the first concrete expression of what's been talked about for some time, and it feels equitable and accessible and fair and open. So I like that. I'm loving the idea of it, and I'm loving what it may become beyond the topic of your research and the small body of people that have been involved in that so far. So I'm sensing the potential beyond that. I'm feeling really enthusiastic about it and keen to support it however I can. So whatever that looks like, I don't have a picture, but I'd love to be able to lend some hands and some heart to how it unfolds.
Thanks so much, Kat. Yeah, to me, that's also one of the exciting things about this initiative, is how I feel it sort of brings together several strands of intention and or flows of energy that were already emerging and bubbling up. And perhaps it can be an interesting crucible for new energy and new initiatives to also emerge out of it. Thank you so much for your support. David?
Well, I was fortunate to have another meeting with you, Dorian, and Wendy. You interviewed me about my story, but we also discussed some ideas about the learning initiative. For me, the most interesting idea about it is that it represents the introduction of a new sphere of attention into the Deep Adaptation Forum. That sphere being the sphere of ideas as distinct from the sphere of feelings. That we have feelings pretty well covered. The events that are currently offered by the Deep Adaptation Forum are almost all about feelings, emotions, personal experience. I think we can add a different set of events that are about ideas. Because deep adaptation, Jem Bendel's deep adaptation, comes with a set of ideas that are fertile, and people use them, and they are worthy of exploration. Specifically, I think we should start with the 4 R's: resilience, relinquishment, restoration, and reconciliation. I think we should start there, because they do constitute a foundation, one of the foundational pillars of deep adaptation as an idea or as a system. Recently, Jem, in conjunction with the publication of the book, in 2 different videos that I saw him publish, is talking about deep adaptation as a 4-part thing. And the 4 parts are an ethos, a framework, a community, and a movement. Ethos, framework, community, and movement. The ethos is generally the love, compassion, respect, the loving response. The framework is specifically the 4 R's. The community is the Facebook group and the forum together, I guess, the group of people. And the movement is less well defined. He talks about the group in India that was studying deep adaptation. The pandemic hit, and they used their existing connections to help people stranded in the country. They became a mutual aid group based on the affiliation through deep adaptation. And that's the example he gives as a movement. So I think that a sphere of attention and a planned series of events around the ideas of deep adaptation would advance a learning objective and would be popular content and would give us a reason to explore new formats of online interaction and could be a very a cohesive and energizing phenomenon. Let's put it that way. So that is my particular interest, to be involved with a series of events which could be characterized as discussion groups, because I don't think it's a teacher teaching. I don't think we want to, we may in another context want to invite teachers, academics, extremely accomplished people who are already published. We may want to invite them in to deliver their knowledge. But what I'm interested in is learning how to elicit the knowledge and thoughts in the realm of ideas from the people we have around us. And that's what I'm interested in being involved with on the learning side. Thank you.
Thanks so much, David. Go ahead, Matthew.
I love what you just say. Really, really resonate with what you're saying, very much. There was a couple of things I wanted to mention. The ethos movement.
Ethos, framework, community, and movement.
Yes, I would add a 5th to that. Deep adaptation is also a meme. Those 4 are, if you like, within our sphere of influence. It's also a meme with a life of its own. So that you probably will find survivalist fascists using the word or the term. And I think just acknowledging that in addition is worth keep bearing in mind. You know, great. I really like that framing. The other thing was, I too have been sort of yearning for this place where we can share ideas around deep adaptation and what's happening, and I think we've already set a precedent for how to listen emotionally to each other in spaciousness and owning and all that. And I think the same could be done, you know, that's highly transformable to how we share ideas. Yeah, just having a formulation for how we conduct ourselves in those idea spaces. Yeah, where we have, you know, truly meditative, if you like, spacious, owned slowly unfolding exploration of ideas rather than banter and babble and fast paced. Yeah, but I love it.
Yeah, I'm loving. I also got some goosebumps just thinking about what you just said, Matthew. Imagining ways of engaging in dialogue and even debate without falling into, wanting to be right, or not listening to the other party. How to transfer, as you say, the maybe deep listening or even deep relating ways of that have been processes that have been explored quite thoroughly. Yeah, and how to apply them to the realm of ideas. That sounds super valuable. And also what you said about DA being a meme, and people then, being able to use it wherever and however they like. And I think this makes it all the more necessary for people who are most steeped into the ethos and the framework and the community and the movement to flesh out that meme, right? Which is, I think, what we're discussing, what David has been suggesting, right? So that it's perhaps it becomes stronger and less easy to distort and to say, no, deep adaptation actually means this or that or something.
Yeah, just to add to that, the version of deep adaptation that is it Michael Mann that's criticizing DA, the version of DA that's in his head that he's criticizing, I'd criticize it if that's what we were. It's so that DA meme has a life of its own and means different things to different people in different contexts. So the more we can flesh out what it is to us and influence that. But it to a certain extent, it's already out the bag. It's already in existence in cyberspace, mutating according to its own whatever.
Thanks. Okay, so what I've heard so far is that we have expressed enthusiasm, strong interest in inviting people in deep adaptation to consider their experience in a different light and see how they can make sense of it, and also consider how certain contexts within the deep adaptation forum seem most conducive to deep changes happening in people. We're also interested in starting to put together bits of guidance that could help newcomers to make sense of deep adaptation and the deep adaptation forum as they enter in a way which is equitable and fair and doesn't place some knowledge holders at the top, but encourage sharing of understanding and experience, as well as opening up a new sphere of discussions, to use your words, David, which would bring people together in a common space to engage with ideas of deep adaptation in ways that would be as influenced by the ethos of deep adaptation itself and the modalities that have been explored so far as possible. Have I forgotten anything? To me, those were the points that really stuck out. And Kat, I just saw your note. Interesting. So one of the most vile critics of deep adaptation has been tweeting about her inner transformation using very deep adaptation language and processes. Yeah, something to keep in mind, and maybe see how that happens.
Sorry to jump in. It was when Matthew was talking about the meme that Michael Mann is responding to, this image of what deep adaptation is. It just spoke to the importance of that as the fifth element, because this particular climate scholar was vociferous about deep adaptation in the early days, and prolific in her criticisms, and yeah, her perspective. She's still not talking deep adaptation forum or the benefits of, but she's using that language in those processes. So the importance of that meme is just, it felt like that was a point worth making.
Yeah, perhaps she'll be joining us at some point soon.
I think that's the importance of focusing on the learning side, isn't it? Is that we are, what I think we use the number, we throw the number 15,000 around, but there are millions of people on social media who have deep concerns. And if the memes going around, if we can start adding this kind of ideas discussion in a medium that is shareable, it might be that people can refute some of Michael Mann, some of this girl, if she's still shouting about women, shouting about how abhorrent we are while using the processes herself. If we share stuff that can be, given back on social media is also useful, because a deep listening session can't be shared. So there's a thought there.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say is, it's almost like it's a form of popular education project in a way, right? Or spreading knowledge and countering disinformation, perhaps. So it doesn't have to be always one person within the deep adaptation forum saying, no, that's not correct. It can be maybe more organic. Yeah. Okay. So with all of this in mind, as you probably remember, what Wendy and I were introducing as some tentative building blocks for the conscious learning thing on the last call were three main things. So there was a new blog, the Conscious Learning blog. I'm not sure if we've all seen it. Kat, I know you have, David too, Matthew. Let me paste the link for you in the chat, so you can take a look in your own time. So the Conscious Learning blog is a place in which, first of all, Wendy and I can invite people we've interviewed so far to share their own learning journeys, which we've been discussing with them in our interviews. So Kat, for example, your learning journey is on the blog. Thank you so much for that. And David and Matthew, you will each be invited to share your learning journey also. Wendy and I just need to take another look at your respective interviews in the coming days. People are also invited to share insights, which are shorter snapshots of personal change or insight, realization about stuff, which is related to any experience they might have had in the Deep Adaptation Forum, or conversation with someone they met through the Deep Adaptation Forum, and so on and so forth. And so far, there's only text on the blog, but it's also possible people are invited to contribute sounds, videos, images, whatever it is, but just a reflection of personal change, learning, just shifts happening. And there are several ways in which people can do that. They can either create an account directly. So anyone here can just create their own account and then post something. It's also possible to send something via the contact form. And then, I can take care of publishing that. But yeah, so this Conscious Learning blog aims to be like a kind of mirror to the network of what is happening inside the network in terms of personal changes. The second thing we mentioned was the idea of collecting resources that have been most useful to people on their learning journeys. So this connects with what David has been mentioning. So and the Deep Adaptation Resource Repository project that I think every one of you has been connected with in one way or the other. I know that Matthew, you were on one or two calls about this, and David and Wendy have also been discussing this. Kat, I think you've also been involved somehow. But yeah, the idea of bringing together in a particular place some useful elements to help others to learn, and that could be websites, courses, whatever. And so Wendy and I have been discussing with David the idea of inviting every research participant so far, but we could also bring in more people to share, for example, the 10 preferred resources to get started on deep adaptation. But this could be widened. And the third stream of activity, or the third path, is organizing webinars that are specifically on learning and connected with deep adaptation, societal collapse, and so on. So Wendy and I have been talking to a few people who have already said that they'd be happy to be on a Q&A with us, which would be open to everyone in the forum. So, for example, Sarah Bittle, who was one of the first moderators of the Deep Adaptation Facebook group, Jane Dwinnow, who I don't need to introduce, Jen Bendel, same, and also Etienne and Beverly Wenger-Trainer, who are learning theorists and whose works are quite central to the research that Wendy and I are doing. So we're hoping to actually interview them in person in Portugal in early August. So that's quite exciting. But David, you also mentioned another series of discussions that could also fit absolutely within that program, which would, from what I understand, would begin with an exploration of the 4 R's, perhaps one call per R. And there could be discussions around whether to add some extra R's, extra elements to that. Yeah, so at least in my mind, those are like the 3 main strands that I'm kind of following. And I'm wondering if there's, so first of all, if each of us here feels called to any of those particular spheres of activity in terms of support, in terms of personal involvement. David, you've touched upon this as regards the online conversations. So I'm wondering if Matthew, Kat, or Wendy, if there's anything that you feel particularly enthusiastic about, and if there's anything else that you'd like to bring into the mix.
I like all 3 of all 3 threads, but as a facilitator, obviously my real interest is the dialogues and the conversations, particularly if they're exploring. So if I can help with those, coordinating them or helping, supporting, holding the space, that would be a privilege.
Thanks so much. Matthew?
Yeah, I'm particularly drawn to that too, the dialogue space. It really captures my longing and imagination. But the other 2, I was thinking about that first one too much to really sort of process the other 2 just right now. Yeah, I found a lot myself getting very enthusiastic about the idea space.
Thanks. Wendy?
it's interesting for me if the three of you, David, Kat, and Matthew, are interested in David's how to create a new kind of discussion in deep adaptation. I think there's many things that can happen. It's not just 1 or 2 webinars for this Summer Learning Festival. It's potentially a structure for conversations about difficult ideas that lifts out of the work we've already done on the emotional, the relating. Dorian, am I fuzzy? So I would love to see you not only pursue this and come up with 1 or 2 webinars. I'd love to see Jem re-interviewed on the 4Rs as maybe an introductory webinar on that. So really, how does he apply them? Not reiterate what's in the blog, but how does he apply them? And then use that as the basis for other people to talk about how they apply them. But what I'd love to see as well is some self-reflection from you and others involved on how those conversations are difficult and what tools you're using, what inner work you're doing to have that conversation and to do the learning in the moment. So I can see that there's learning at many levels here. So I'm super excited about that. And I think the other 2, Dorian, you and I can continue doing some base work on the interviews we already have to create the learning blogs. But certainly we can work on others to write some insights, if not full learning journeys. And the resources thing, if we come up with a format, I think we can I'm happy to get widely involved in inviting volunteers, you know, to start giving us their.
You seem to have broken off at the end here, Wendy. Saying happy to invite volunteers to.
Yeah, I'd be happy to own that, take responsibility for trying to get the resources together once we've all agreed how that will look. I think David was quite excited that there's a space for that in the new learning blog, a separate tab maybe, but maybe that's where it can live for the moment.
Thanks. Yeah, so that's actually a very good point to bring up. Yeah, David, when we were discussing those ideas of resources with you, you mentioned, well, I think perhaps the 2 of you, Wendy and you, had the idea of starting a new site to start as a database, to start adding resources to it. Am I correct in understanding that currently you feel more drawn towards letting those live discussions emerge, and perhaps you're less pulled towards the resource gathering side? Sorry if I'm misunderstanding anything.
No, I think you're right. The resource side, I actually came to that late. You and Katrina, I think, had, and maybe Wendy, I don't know the history, but someone had put a lot of work into it before I latched onto it. I didn't realize that at first. So I think Katrina has actually created a separate subdomain, or somehow there's a data.deepinfo. I think it's empty, but I think it's there. I think it's more appropriate, or not more appropriate. There are benefits perhaps to blending it with the more substantive effort somehow. And it might be easier to collect. I mean, you mentioned inviting the people you've talked to. That's a great thing to do. And if somehow there were also, if there is a series of events, collecting and offering resources in that context, I think a context maybe would be helpful for the resources in particular. And then that can be extracted and preserved in a database as well.
So what I'm hearing is that it would make sense to first start aggregating resources shared by people in the blog, in the website that already hosts the learning blog, and that the events that will be organized this summer could be a good context in which to ask people to share their resources. Okay, yeah, that sounds good to me. And Wendy, you're in agreement with this? Super. Okay, so in that case, perhaps Wendy and I could discuss this a bit further, how we could go about collecting resources and inviting people to share them. One idea I wanted to bring up on this level, which we also discussed with you briefly, David, was that of inviting people to be in breakout rooms together and share recommendations on readings or podcasts or whatever in a dialogic form. So people would be together, say 10 minutes, and there would be a topic such as what has been a very useful YouTube video for you in the past year or so to understand deep adaptation better. And then, yeah, can you tell the other person why? And each breakout room would be harvesting the conversation in just simple form, but with a few comments on why that particular resource would be interesting. And yeah, I'm curious to have your thoughts as to how, whether this would be something you personally feel interested in taking part. Do you think it might work? Is it, yeah, or is it a foolish idea?
It doesn't appeal to me, but I may not be the standard customer, as it were. It could be a way for people to have the opportunity to talk about what's valuable to them and then capture that. Could be. It could be difficult to support the multiplicity of venues. It's like if you split that out, then somehow everything needs to be managed somehow. I really don't know. I really do not have good ideas about what is an effective, efficient way to collect these resources. It turns out to be a lot more difficult problem than it seems, and I do not understand why. So I can't really pass on a solution.
Yeah, and for me, Dorian, there's something as well about the context. So I have long lists of books that I'd like to read one day that people have recommended or but if they don't come in a context, if it's not as a result of a moment shared or an experience or some little realization when someone will go, oh, I know what you might really like. You might really like to read this book. In that instance, I will go and find it immediately because there's a point of meaning in my life that book is pointing at. Does that make sense? So the context is so important. I understand that for others, having a long list of resources that they can add to their must read, must watch might work, but I suspect I'm a bit more like you, David. It's not that I don't value those things. I absolutely do, but they come about through relationship rather than just as a list of resources. So I get how it might be helpful if we're sharing a video and we might say for additional information, or the interviewees or the panelists have pointed at these resources that have helped them to formulate their responses or their way of being, but tying it back to that context feels really important rather than just a catalogue of endless things that might have been helpful at that for a moment in time.
Thanks. Wendy, did you want to say something? Matthew, I see you also.
Yeah, just riffing off some of the stuff that's been said so far, I'm wondering if David, the document that you and I have sort of been playing around with, the resources document, could be a direct link or a direct addendum to people's learning journeys. So in this blog where people talk about themselves and how they came to DA, a list of the resources that they perhaps mention, because a lot of our interviews actually have mentions of resources, but even ones they don't, we encourage all of them to come up with a handful, up to 10 or whatever. So there is context in that way. If you've read the interview and it's a person whose journey makes sense to you, you probably find quite a few of their resources meaningful. But equally, this aspect of the blog, sorry, Dorian, did you want to? The aspect of the blog that talks about insights, learning insights. Maybe that's where we can play with this idea of people discussing back and forward a reference that was meaningful for them. So I might go in and talk at quite great length about how much I've got out of transition movements and, the various books that Rob's written and which ones were most useful to me, and maybe 1 or 2 videos. So it's a compact story around a type of resource that comes from me that's possibly has a link to my learning journey as well. And yeah, Kat, again, if we put resources, specific resource discussions around useful resources into a blog format, those blogs could also be video or podcasts.
Thanks, Wendy. So what I'm hearing, and what I think I also heard from Kat, is that there should be as much rich context associated with each resource, so that it feels as personable and relatable in a way as possible. Yeah, so to avoid the kind of cold anonymity of long lists of stuff. And so, yeah, I really like this idea of associating in particular interviews or events or even panels with resources for people to go further. I think that sounds like a great idea. And as what you mentioned, Wendy, as regard insights, perhaps you and I can touch on this with further, going forward. But I think that there's a lot of potential there. Matthew, you wanted to chip in?
Yeah, I was just gonna riff on the I love that word, riff, Wendy. The idea about how we locate and digest information and the rate we do it. And for me, it's synchronicity is the word I was going to just bring in that into as well. The right resource at the right time. And lists of resources, yes, they do work for some people, but we're all super saturated with information and we can only digest at a certain rate and all that sort of thing. So yeah, and I also sort of came bounding into that project, not realizing how advanced it had been, with a sort of particular enthusiasm around organization, what would be the protocols for organizing organization, and also realized that people had done a lot of work on it and were sort of far advanced of where I was at. And the actual techie side of the project doesn't appeal to me. It's more the philosophical ideas-y side, and actually it is to some extent a techie project. So I've drifted out of that project. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, there is definitely a tech element in particularly as regards the resources and the blog. Yeah, I think so far we're not planning on doing anything too sophisticated, but maybe to have a good thinking around how things are set up, so that it doesn't feel like this huge thing which is completely impenetrable, because so many people have shared with me, and I'm sure with many of you, that particularly when they're new to deep adaptation and deep adaptation forum, it can just be so difficult to orient oneself. Right? So I think it would be really good to to provide tools for orientation which are easily accessible and inclusive. Great. Wow. So just keeping I'm aware of the time. I had sent you invitations for a 1 hour call. Wondering if we could stay on for another few minutes, like 10 minutes or something to, yeah. Of course, if you have other pressing matters to attend, no worries at all. There's one idea which I haven't brought up yet, which is connected to, well, to many things that we've discussed so far. When Wendy and I have been discussing the blog, the conscious learning blog, it appeared to us that it would be really nice to have lots and lots of content there, so that there are as many different ways for people to find other people with whom they might resonate in terms of experience and learning and so on. And one idea I had around this was to invite facilitators of deep adaptation events to systematically, during at least this summer, invite people at the end of each event to please share something on the blog, on the conscious learning blog, if they've had any particular insight, any form of new connection they made, about something else, that seems to bring up some change in them, or it could be just a very minute, very microscopic things, but to invite as many people as possible to at least check out the blog, see if they want to comment on anything, see if they want to publish something, and because otherwise there's the risk that it will remain something a bit, unknown and in a kind of dark corner of the ecosystem. So, for example, the events that you, David, have been describing, inviting people to engage in discussions about the 4 Rs or other ideas, at the end of such an event, people could also be invited to share any kind of insights they got from it on the blog, and perhaps add a particular tag so that it's easy to know very quickly, okay, series of events, I don't know, deep adaptation philosophical conversations. You click on that tag and you get to see what people got out of it, so to speak. So just curious to have your thoughts and impressions on this, whether it makes sense, if so, how to do it well. Any comments or feedback are welcome.
It brings up a question for me that I've had since I learned of your idea here. My question is, why are there 2 blogs? Why isn't this material going on the main deep adaptation blog? And why are there 2? And that goes to answer your question, is the kinds of insights that you're asking for could be good material for the main blog. It could all be one editorial effort. I don't know how it's set up, but that's a question that I've been wondering about.
Yeah, thanks for that, David. I'm really pleased you asked it. Like I said, my brain's not working very well, but in your last share, Dorian, what was coming up for me was I was getting the sense of replication or duplication of effort, and I don't know where, but it feels like it would be really powerful to make sure that this energy around conscious learning is more fully integrated into the infrastructure we already have, and is done so in a way that feeds into the new infrastructure, which is under exploration at the moment. So yeah, David spoke that question beautifully, but for me, and I couldn't put my finger on where it is, but I had a curiosity about duplication or separation. Yeah, replicating efforts that are going on elsewhere, because we've got really powerful, active, vibrant conversations going on. And I know this is somehow separate, but it's not completely separate. There are links that we ought to be aiming to strengthen. I guess is my sense of it. And what David just said about combining the blogs might be my understanding of the blog, and I know this may shift with Kat's appointment into Commons role, but they were at one time aiming for publications every week, essentially. But second week of the month could be a conscious learning theme. And then, yeah, we could be sorting blog posts according to those sort of themes. Sorry, I'm losing mental power.
Not at all. Yeah, I think Wendy, you and I must have discussed something along those lines. At least, yeah, in my mind, it was, yeah, there was always the possibility for things from the conscious learning blog to be sort of aggregated and made into a more digestible form and put onto the main DAF blog, right? Did we talk about this?
Dorian, I think what happened is, but that's definitely where we started. But just to get this project going, you've done, what you do. You've created a space to show us what these things would look like. And I wonder if doing this work for these 2 or 3 months that we're doing a summer conscious learning introduction session for deep adaptation in 2021 becomes a batch that then moves into the main editorial blog once that agreement has been formed and Kat's had a good look at it and we decide if there's anything problematic about it. And it's possibly a specific type of blog. So there's a point on the blog, or there's a tab on the blog that you can click and go to just the conscious learning stuff. But I agree with Kat. I think it's important because in future, I wouldn't like it to stop because we've done 3 months of a festival. And I would love for us to invite people to share their learning journeys. I think it's a huge value. And it also feeds into the discussion around we need to get people off Facebook. And people want to talk about this stuff. They want to talk about something that they've learned or some resource that's kicked them off or some disaster that's kicked them off and what has happened. And that's what we want to try and capture for everyone that comes after them, to say, this is how people are deeply adapting. Thanks, Kat.
I love that because then there's it's a different flavor, isn't it? We're all deeply adapting in intensely personal ways. And it paints that it's a much richer tapestry.
Absolutely. Yeah, this all feels absolutely, yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. I feel the conscious learning blog has the potential to be more of a sandbox in a way, and a less carefully edited space compared to the main DAF blog. So a place where people can feel just have the potential to just post something, an image, something, and as long as it agrees with the DAF charter and it doesn't, share any private information about someone or whatever. If it's acceptable content, then it's just there. And then what you said, Kat, about having every 2 weeks or something, a learning week for the main DAF blog with some content sort of channeled into there and having this cross-pollination happening makes a lot of sense, I feel. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. It's a bit like trialing facilitating events in a safe space. Yeah, or a safer space. But I completely agree that integration has to happen. Wendy?
And I think what you're saying, Dorian, will make the editorial team much more comfortable if they can come and look through stuff in a sandbox where we're getting on with the Conscious Learning Festival. Then Kat and her team can look through, and maybe there is a comment or an upvote facility that they see that some of the blogs are more read or more interesting or more helpful, and those are the ones that they maybe edit so it fits their, what structures they want, and just move some of them across.
Yeah, I can discuss that with Kat in the coming days and see what she thinks. So in terms of mentioning the blog at the end of each event and things like that, is it something that you feel would be a bit over the top? As in calling people's attention away from the DAF main blog and towards this more fringe initiative?
One thing I didn't quite understand is that it seems like your project is a time-limited thing. You've got a conscious learning festival, 3 months, I guess you're talking about. So I think that's a great framing. And you can just say, we're doing this event for this period of time, and here are some results from that. And there's a special space where we're harvesting. And then when it's done, then you'll have the opportunity to see how it fits in. But I think that's important to frame it that way, if this is a one-off. I mean, it's more than that, but if you have a specific frame, yeah.
Thanks, David. Yeah, absolutely. Of course, the hope is that it might then acquire a life of its own eventually, and yeah, people continuing to contribute and have conversations. But yeah, having it have time boundaries is what we've been considering so far. Matthew, did you want to come in on this, or what's your sense?
No, all good. My energy's nosediving. I'm really thrilled by the whole project, but thrill is depleting now.
Dorian, can I make a suggestion? Because we're 15 minutes after the hour now. Is that these three lovely people sound like they're super excited about the 4 hours discussion, or whatever format that's going to take. I mean, that may sort of shift slightly as they discuss it. May I suggest that we go out of this meeting, you and I pick up the 2 pieces of the 3 that we can sort out with this great feedback, and that David, Matthew, and Kat maybe on their own cognizance arrange a meeting and take the 4 hours things forward, because you're quite busy at the moment, but potentially if you're available, they could invite you to listen in or whatever. But we do what we've been talking about, where we let things move out of a central point and be handled by groups on the edges who are more than capable. Once the initial ideas are kind of tuned, we're all tuned to the same.
I'm very receptive to that. Matthew?
That sounds like really sage FOMO advice.
What does it mean, FOMO?
Fear of missing out.
Ah,
Something I suffer from greatly in the deep adaptation realm. I want to be in on everything.
Absolutely, and it's Dorian's baby, but I mean, I'm fascinated by anything that you guys do, but I'm fascinated by everything that everyone does, and I can't be everywhere at one place. So I'm happy to work on the first 2 or whatever numbers they were, and hand over to you guys to do the 4 hours discussion, which I'm super excited about. I don't use 4 hours, so I'm expecting you to come up with something that I can use.
Cool. Okay, so does that sound okay with Kat, David, and Matthew to sort of take a more active role in launching that series of conversations on the ideas of deep adaptation? Amazing. Okay, and then yeah, we'll just keep integrating everything. And just a question on, in terms of coordinating those separate streams of activity, what would be the most convenient way? Email? Should we do this in the Slack channel, just to keep each other informed of what's going on? Would it make sense to just do this in the development, training, and dissemination channel in Slack, for example?
I'd suggest that's exactly where we put it, because there are other people there who have wisdom to contribute. And it maintains that principle of open door and transparency.
Okay, good for everyone. Yeah, super. So we'll use that channel as our main coordination channel then for all those beautiful activities. Wow. Okay, so is there anything else that needs to be said, expressed before we have some checkouts?
I just want to add something about learning and about how we shift between mental ideas, academic research stuff, and this total other world of that's pretty esoteric. And is it spirit? Is it energy? Who knows? Is that, Dorian, correct me if I'm wrong, but you dreamed this. So this need to do something this summer, coming out of your research and our interviews and the wonderful things we've been hearing, you dreamed a kind of a pretty solid structure, actually, because what's happening is pretty close to what you described to me initially. And I love that. And I think it's important that we think about that. We all keep dreaming and sharing our dreams, because sometimes it becomes pretty solid.
Agreed. Let's keep attuned to the liminal spheres of inspiration and engagement. Okay, so if there isn't anything else, let's have a quick round of checkouts. Who would like to go first?
I want to know what Kat's eating.
Say again, Wendy.
I want to know what you're eating.
I'm eating a Malaysian style peanut satay chicken with a lot of vegetables.
Oh, I'm so jealous. That sounds gorgeous.
And I was starving, and my family are on another family call starting any minute now. So yeah, this was my window for dinner. And while I'm speaking, I'll check out. I am inspired, excited, and curious to see how this all unfolds. I love the idea of working with David and Matthew, because, you know, who wouldn't? And with that, I'll hand to you, Matthew.
Yeah, I'm delighted at the prospect of what we just, you know, began to explore. I've got a lot of energy for it, and for Kat and David, and you, Wendy and Dorian. So, yeah, my energy is crashing, but yeah, I'm really glad I came. Thank you.
I'll go.
Okay.
Thanks. I feel the potential for more traction, getting a grip, producing something useful, and that's my gig. So the feeling of potential traction is very exciting, and I look forward to working with Kat and Matthew as well. Thank you.
I just love hearing lots of happy people with tasks ahead of them they're looking forward to. I feel like there's lots of stuff I can get my teeth into. So I'm very happy to be working closely with all of you. And yeah, great that everyone could make this meeting. I'm sorry that Mayan was not well, Dorian, but good that it worked out this way.
Thanks, Wendy. Thank you all. I feel really energized, and I don't know. Yeah, I sense lots of resonance between our intentions, our energies, our hearts and spirits. So it feels, yeah, very precious, and I feel honored and delighted. So take care, everyone, and let's stay in touch using the channel.
Bye, everyone.
Bye for now.
Have a good meeting, Kat.
Bye.
Dorian, have a great week with